Hello, gorgeous, and welcome to the Midlife Realignment. I'm your host, Esther Blum, and I'm here to disrupt the narrative on perimenopause and menopause with humor, nutrition, hormones, and fierce self-advocacy. Together, we'll rewrite your story and the rules because there's a light at the end of the vaginal tunnel. Let's go. Dr. Mariza Snyder is a powerhouse advocate for midlife women, leveraging 17 plus years as a practitioner, author, and speaker to spark a massive movement for women in perimenopause and beyond. With her top-rated Energized with Dr. Mariza podcast, which has 13 million downloads and a passionate social media audience of over 400,000 and 8 million monthly views, she's a trusted guide offering science-backed solutions for perimenopause and metabolic health. Her upcoming book, The Perimenopause Revolution, which is coming out with Hay House in October of 2025, is the ultimate resource for women ready to take charge of their health and embrace perimenopause with resilience and confidence. Check out her website, drmariza.com, that's drmariza.com, for solutions to thrive. Dr. Mariza, my queen, I am so thrilled to have you here today. Thank you for taking time out.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here.
Okay, your book, your beautiful, beautiful book, The Perimenopause Revolution, was like, it's really a sisterhood in here, is it not?
That was the intention, because community is how not only do we build each other up, but also we kind of validate that we're not crazy when we're going through this phase.
Amen. And you have had, I have a stack of questions to ask you, but you have been through the ringer with migraines, going from childbirth right into perimenopause. So I kind of want to spend some time just unpacking your personal story before we really get into questions about the science and the book. So tell everyone, what your journey has been like. And you also had mold toxicity. So the perfect shitstorm of hormones. So talk to us about that.
I will tell you, you can go through this profound transition of perimenopause and there are still other things that you are contending with. I think that's why it makes it so profound. I had a migraine yesterday and I took all the drugs to mitigate it. And so that really not for yesterday, but so that I could show up this morning. That was my full intent. I was like, okay, I have a lot of interviews on Monday and I need to get this migraine under control. Because so often, if anyone's listening and they're a migraine sufferer, you know that often you have a migraine hangover the next day. I call it the shrapnel of whatever, the residue of a migraine. And that, it really epitomizes what my perimenopause journey has been, of just trying to do the very best I can at being a mom and mitigating symptoms and doing all the things that I can do within my power and control to future-proof my health. Even when, some days aren't the best days. And this is with Esther, this is with hormone replacement therapy. This is with good sleep consistency. This is with moving my body with intention. This is with eating foods that are reducing inflammation. This is with balancing blood sugar. I will say that this journey has been such an eye-opening experience because it has taught me that I get to reframe that, and more so reframing how I take care of myself. And that even on my bad days, doing the best I can to shore up my health is probably the number one thing I can do.
Amen to that. And it's funny. I had the worst migraine on my birthday this year. Like I was throwing up. I was so dizzy and nauseous. Same thing, hangover the next day. I finally got some Zofran and took that. That's an anti-nausea med for those of you who don't know. And I was just like, holy crap. Like as providers, we are no more immune as anyone else. And it can really be a storm, but knowing you have the tools, knowing it's temporary, God willing.
That's the reframe.
It's helpful.
Knowing that. And there are some things about perimenopause that are going to be temporary, but I also want to highlight the silent shifts. If I'm not proactive, if we're not proactive as women in this, what I call this metabolic window of opportunity, we will see our blood pressure creep. we will see our lipids start to creep out of range. Our blood glucose will start to go out of range, become more variable. We may start creeping towards prediabetes. And, you know, it breaks my heart the fact that we have prediabetes and we have diabetes. I'm like, there's no pre about prediabetes. You know, when our blood glucose levels are in, you know, above 100 milligrams per deciliter, you know, that's going to have a profound impact, a negative impact on our overall cellular health, our vascular health, our brain health. And so I want to point out that some of the symptoms that we experience in perimenopause can just be for this season, but other parts of this journey, the silent shifts, can continue into menopause and beyond. I always say that perimenopause in so many ways is really a continuum. You know, I think one of the greatest myths of perimenopause is how we can tell women, oh, well, this is just, you're just going to have these crazy symptoms. You're just going to be in the zone of chaos for a little bit of time. But I think that doesn't set us up to win in the sense that, well, what happens on the other side? How do we future-proof our health so that not only are we mitigating symptoms right now today? I always talk about double dipping, how I want to double dip to mitigate my symptoms now, but also to feel good now. And I also want a lot of those strategies to set me up to win in 20, 30, 40 years down the road.
That's right. And by the way, some of these symptoms can last 10, 15 years. And these symptoms, if left untreated, I mean, I've had women in my practice in their 70s who still are hot flashing because they never got treated. So this is why your book is so important, because it is the early intervention. And even if you're not having symptoms, it's just like what you said, like the silent symptoms are the most dangerous ones.
The bone loss, the muscle loss, the cardiovascular changes, all of those are the things that really affect our quality of life down the road. And again, some of us can feel it's a very small minority, but that we're like, oh, we somehow got through perimenopause because we didn't have a hot flash, or we didn't have night sweats, or maybe we didn't have vaginal dryness, whatever that is. Although, you know, I'm a full proponent that all vaginas need estrogen, all vaginas.
Thank you. All vaginas need to be juicy and lubed up, because you know what most women don't realize is, I always call it the case of the disappearing vagina. Like your labia, if left untreated, they shrink up and disappear. And there goes your pleasure centers. And there comes in a lot of dryness. So I'm so glad you brought that up. It's really important. Let's go back to just some basics. Like, can you educate people?
I know. All of a sudden we're talking about
I know. Juicy vaginas, but let's go back to the basics. So what is happening to our hormones in perimenopause, and how does that impact a woman's mental and physical well-being?
I love this question because this is one of the biggest questions that I get when I have a patient who's trying to figure out if her symptoms are connected to her hormones and if it's perimenopause. And so I want to just quickly reverse engineer very quickly, because I think we all know what menopause is, but quick definition is menopause is that defining moment, that one day in time. And if you're on HRT, you're never going to know it, but it's that one day in time where you haven't had a period for 12 months in a row. And on average, that happens to us at 51 years old. It's usually around the time your mama went through it. If you know when your mom went through menopause. And natural menopause is anywhere between 45 and 55 years old. Well, then that means that the transition, perimenopause, is anywhere between 4 and 10 years prior to menopause. So with that math, women can be in perimenopause as early as their mid to late 30s, I would say. Now, in my own experience, and I'm curious where you're at as well, many of my patients are coming to me in their early 40s. That's when they really begin to notice the changes, where I would say, send me a sign, make it impossible for me to miss. At this point, the sleep issues, the cognitive changes, the mental health changes, all of a sudden women begin to really notice, also maybe some menstrual cycle changes. But basically what happens in perimenopause is we get to a point where our ovaries know that we have a limited supply of eggs. And as a result, that communication between our ovaries and the brain becomes a little bit faltered. Think of playing telephone with a bunch of 5-year-olds. And what's that message going to be? By the time we get back, it's going to be garbled. So that miscommunication between the ovaries and the brain starts to disrupt our hormones. estrogen and progesterone predominantly, but testosterone can be impacted as well. Also, these hormones aren't operating in a silo. We know that cortisol can begin to deregulate. We know that melatonin is declining as well. Goodbye sleep. We also know that insulin is affected by not only lifestyle, but also estrogen. It's very influenced by estrogen. So we may notice less insulin sensitivity. So again, I just want people to know that it's not just estrogen and progesterone that are erratically declining. We do have other hormones that are affected, or other hormones that are also impacted by this big change, this big miscommunication between the brain and the ovaries. And as a result, we know now that these hormones aren't just bikini medicine. Like, oh gosh, the fact that just that knowledge gap of understanding women's bodies pervaded for so long. So it's not just the boobs and the ovaries and the uterus that are being impacted. We know that these are whole body hormones that are immune system modulators. They're helping with microbiome diversity. They are helping to remodel bone and build muscle. They're helping to create good metabolic, function in the body. And so as these hormones begin to decline, we start to lose this protective shield. And as a result, hormones are impacting, again, our brain, our sleep, our muscle, our bones, our joints. Women can have over 40 different symptoms in perimenopause as a result of these hormones erratically declining.
I've never heard that term, bikini medicine. I was like, what?
The only difference between men and women, this was so pervasive for so long, was that
oh my God,
women are only impacted in the areas that the bikini covers.
Oh God. If only people knew.
Only we were just small men whose boobs and uterus were affected by our hormones.
Well, what's so interesting, this is just a sidebar for a moment, but if the medical marijuana industry is so pervasive and loud right now. And they're always like, oh, if you go to any doctor, any clinic, they'll say you have cannabinoid receptors on every single cell in your body. But yet women go to a GYN and nobody's telling women you have hormone receptors on every single cell in your body. So it's just, there's such a gap. There's such a loss in education here. I am so curious, what were your first signs and symptoms that led you to get tested? How did you differentiate from being in postpartum to being in perimenopause? Because that is something we're seeing as women have children in their late 30s, early to mid 40s, and sometimes upward 40s. And how do you even know what's what? How do you tease out?
It is so hard to tease out what is what in that transition, because layer on the fact that you are a new mom as well. So a lot of it can look like, and that's what I think often it's blamed on, especially if you're having children later, or even just moms in perimenopause in general, whether you have a 5-year-old or a 13-year-old. So often a lot of the symptoms that we're experiencing are blamed on, oh, you're too stressed. Or, oh, you are, you're overextended, or you're just a mom, or this is just a season in your life. There's a lot of gaslighting and a lot of dismissal that happens. And it's because, a lot of what goes on in perimenopause is a neuroendocrine transition. And that was really the symptoms that were for me. So I got out of postpartum. My son was 2. And mind you, I was still breastfeeding. I knew I was only going to have one. And I was like, I'm going to ride this till the wheels fall off. I was a very self-sacrificing mother out the gate, doing all the things that I could do to support my son, with the research supported. And at the time I knew that I had Hashimoto's thyroiditis before I actually was pregnant. And I spent a whole year at 38 years old, just getting myself into remission, reducing any level of inflammation in the body to prime up to even get pregnant at 40 years old. So just a little bit of backstory there. And I knew what the symptoms of low thyroid function felt like. And if you take a look, if we were to run the symptoms of low thyroid and run the symptoms of perimenopause and even menopause, a lot of them can look very similar. Mind you, it's because many of these hormones, or estrogen, progesterone, thyroid hormone, T3 hormone, they all have receptor sites on multiple cells all over the body. They're all all of these hormones are influencing your cells. So it's no wonder that perimenopause feels like low mental energy. And so does low thyroid. It feels like low mental energy. And so he's 2 years old, and I have this amazing runway, Esther, for like 5 months where I'm working out sometimes twice a day. I've got my brain is firing all cylinders. I have energy to spare. And I thought, oh my gosh, I am finally over this hump of postpartum. And so I kind of step it up. I'm like, okay, I am 43 years old. I know that perimenopause is looming. Maybe I think we all just hope, or we're like, you know what? I've been shoring myself up for so long. Maybe I'm going to shove this back a little bit. Like I think all of us there's a little bit of denial about perimenopause initially. We're like, oh, this can't be it. So I had about a 5 month runway where I felt phenomenal. I felt metabolically healthy. I was wearing a continuous glucose monitor. Some of that time, my blood sugar was optimized. I was sleeping really well outside of waking up for my son. And then around, I would say 6 months in, it was like the spring or early summer of 2023. All of a sudden, my mental energy began to wane. I just felt tired. And it wasn't that I wasn't sleeping. By 3 o'clock, I was tanking. I was feeling more irritable cyclically, but I didn't notice it initially. I wasn't tracking as consistent. I mean, I was tracking, but I wasn't connecting the dots between my symptoms and my cycle. Everything just felt a little bit more elevated. I had low stress tolerance. I wasn't able to multitask the way that I used to. You know how, for years you could have 100 tabs open. And as a woman, you could just nail those 100 tabs. And all of a sudden I couldn't handle all the tabs being open. I found myself really struggling to get through the day, particularly with things that required a lot of high functioning. But the work that we do every day, Esther, it's high functioning work. And so all of a sudden I found myself not being able to, get through interviews without forgetting words. But again, I thought it was my thyroid. So I remember running labs, and I remember my highly sensitive CRP was up, not by a lot, but it was like a 1.4. Just a lot of things were kind of creeping up a little bit. And I was like, okay, what is this? Is this my thyroid? Is it the fact that I was postpartum? And then in the middle of this, as I'm trying to investigate what happens, I got hit in the head. I had 2 major concussions back to back in a 2-week span. And I ended up getting post-concussion syndrome. And then ultimately, I was just, for about 6 months, I was just trying to figure out how to heal my brain, how to address the brain injury. So that kind of put everything else on halt, because that took over my whole life. There were weeks where I couldn't drive a car. I couldn't get myself ready. I definitely couldn't get my son ready for school. Like, my whole life stopped just to heal my brain. And on the back end of that, it was towards the very end of 2023. I remember I felt like I had pretty much shored up a lot of my brain injury symptoms. And I started noticing that about 7 days prior to my period, I would wake up with this feeling of insurmountable dread. I was flat. I felt my life was falling apart. And I would have these days that were punctuated with rage. And it wasn't until it was the third month of this, because I kept thinking that maybe this was brain concussion symptoms still. I was like, oh, I know that people who get hit in the head can have mood symptoms, can experience rage. But by the third month in a row, this is like November, December, the symptoms came on again 6 to 7 days prior to my period, like clockwork. And it was that third month in a row that I then knew, because these were the symptoms that my mother had endured and experienced, that I was truly in perimenopause. And at that point, I had just turned 44 years old, and I was like, okay, obviously I am not escaping this.
No. Oh my God.
It's gotta be perimenopause.
Okay, so 2 things. So one is, ladies, the take home from this is, if you notice, this is a great marker, and you tell me how you feel about this. This is a great marker to know when you're starting to hit perimenopause without doing any lab tests, is if the first half of your cycle is radically different than the second. If you are on the ground.
Feel like yourself in the first half of your cycle, like that follicular phase of your cycle is still kicking. But then you step into that luteal phase, whether you ovulated or not, and all of a sudden all hell breaks loose, then that's when you know. So I will say that first signs of perimenopause are often cyclical. You are good the first half of the month, not so hot the second half of the month. And that could be that second half of the month could be sleep issues. It could be mood issues. It could be a lack of word recall. It could be a low stress tolerance. The most common symptom of perimenopause is irritability.
Yes. And often I feel like that stems from insomnia. And I remember
insomnia and I think a low stress tolerance. I mean, for me, the low stress tolerance, I feel like my stress tolerance packed its bag on day 22 and just walked out the door and did not come back until like day 5 the next month.
Yes. And I find as I've gotten further and further towards menopause, it really hasn't even come back. At some point, it just all blends together. That's late perimenopause. And it can be sooner than that. And I always tell women initially, you'll notice that's why it's so important to be tracking your cycle and tracking your symptoms along with your cycle, because initially, you'll notice like there's some parts of the month where sleep is fine. And then other parts of the month where sleep is complete garbage. Some parts of the month where you've got energy, other parts of the month, you have no mental energy, you have no executive function. And so if you can track your cycle and be like, oh, okay, now I know this is perimenopause, because so often these brain related symptoms or these mental health related symptoms can come on swifter and more intense than menstrual cycle changes. And I think that's what we've all been told is that, okay, perimenopause or the end of perimenopause is hot flashes, night sweats, vaginal dryness, low libido, and, you're skipping periods or you're having crime scene periods. That's what we often thought it was. And so unless you had these classic symptoms and no sleep, right, you couldn't have been in perimenopause. Be lucky you're still cycling. Be lucky you still have a period consistently. And that is not helpful in the least bit, especially when someone is struggling and they don't feel like themselves anymore. No. So when you were teasing things out and healing, you got through your head injuries, but then, we're still working with, is it thyroid? Is it hormones? Like, did you start running your own hormone panels? Pardon me. Did you start looking at your hormones?
By the time I figured this out, I have already spent about $1,200 worth in labs trying to figure it out. And what kept coming up, progesterone, she had disappeared in postpartum. She wasn't coming back. Like I knew that. that was true. So I started progesterone as a concussion protocol and just never stopped.
What is a progesterone? I want to really spend some time on this. What is a progesterone concussion protocol? Explain to everyone how it works.
Yeah. So as many of you may have learned by listening to Esther over the years, we also know that progesterone is also a neurosteroid called allopregnanolone. And it is a powerful immune system modulator. Particularly, it's an anti-inflammatory. That's what I would call progesterone overall. And so when she starts to leave, you'll notice more water retention. You'll notice more inflammation, obviously sleep issues, more mood changes. That's progesterone leaving the party. But what the research is showing, and it's a little bit messy, but what the research is showing is that progesterone will significantly reduce inflammation on the back end of concussions or post-concussion syndrome or a brain injury. And what's driving any level of injury, whether it's the brain or any part of the body, is going to be inflammation. And so that's going to be the name of the game. It's like, how do we get inflammation under control as quickly as possible on the back end of a brain injury? And so I was taking a higher dose of progesterone. I was taking 300 milligrams of progesterone nightly, continuously. And so I will say that as a result of continuously taking progesterone, I wasn't cycling it because my brain was at stake. It didn't matter. I would say that I was choosing my brain over my menstrual cycle. I did this for 90 days. I basically took continuous progesterone for 90 days. And obviously it kind of acted like its own form of birth control. Like my cycle completely disappeared by the end of this. And so it took me about a month or so. I didn't get my cycle back online until the start of 2024 after being on continuous 300 milligrams of oral micronized progesterone every day, every night.
I bet your sleep kicked ass after that.
Yeah, my sleep was amazing.
And it's so interesting. I came across a research study this morning that showed that instead of women spending 3 days in the hospital with severe postpartum depression and getting infusions of this $34,000 drug, that if you give injectable progesterone, which is like 50 cents a day. It quells postpartum depression. And I used to, and gets women out of suicidal ideations and gets them functioning again. And, I used to give my patients, if they were just in the very early beginnings of perimenopause, I'd say, okay, take Chase Tree. And Chase Tree really helps eke out progesterone from your ovaries and boost the production. And now I'm like, you know what? You have to wait 3 months for that to kick in. Nobody's got time for this. Progesterone is so safe and gentle.
I do not recommend. I mean, if you want to take Chaseberry, you're in your 20s, you're in your 30s, by all means. But like, I cannot tell you how many of my patients and friends of mine who are in their mid 30s, who it's very clear that they need oral micronized progesterone.
Yes.
Some friends of mine and patients will start at like 50, especially if they're 34 years old.
Exactly.
But often they ramp up to 100 cycling. I think that there's something about this I know that there's something about living in this modern day world that is not conducive to optimized hormones, but most importantly, not conducive to, optimal ovulation. And without great ovulation, even in our reproductive years, we're going to see substandard progesterone levels on the back end, especially as we enter our early to mid 30s. And so, I have a friend of mine who, she's 40 years old and got pregnant, but miscarried. And one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to get her on oral micronized progesterone because she wants to have that second baby. And I'm just like, we're not taking, like, let's not take a risk. Let's not take a chance here. Right. Let's just shore up everything that we can possibly do to guarantee, because girl, you're 40. Like,
we're not playing.
Whether we catch you on a good day or not, guarantee those levels are not what they used to be, even 2 or 3 years ago.
That's right. And so imagine the heartache we can save women and the time and the expense. If you're investing in fertility, the safety and efficacy of oral micronized progesterone has been proven again and again. It protects the uterus, helps you hold on to those babies, helps you hold on to those precious pregnancies. And you can really go, the safety and efficacy has been demonstrated even at very high doses. One of my colleagues, who's a GYN, Dr. Anatsapan, she talks about how her patients, some of them are on 900 to 1,000 in menopause milligrams every night, because that's what they need to sleep. That's what they need to function. And I've even heard other providers go up to 3,500 milligrams a night. So it's like, that's unusual, but it can be done. So 100 milligrams is safe. It's effective. You can get it through your pharmacy. My Prometrium cost me $4 a bottle.
I was going to say, it's cheaper than Chaseberry.
Oh my God. It's cheaper. It's more effective. So like, that's the take home from today. It's like, it heals your brain. I mean, oh my God. Incredible concussion.
Like any brand new mom, I was super sleep deprived. The older we get, that sleep becomes so critical. And I was on oral micronized progesterone for a few weeks just to kind of get me through that first month. And I know the only thing that we think about, like, it's not a contraindication by any means, but it can potentially lower breast milk supply. But again, most women just need it for a small amount of time to kind of get through that hump. Yes. And to get back to kind of feeling, I don't know how long it takes to really get to feel like yourself in those first few months of postpartum. But man, progesterone can be so beneficial. And so for me, it wasn't even an injection. It was oral micronized progesterone.
That's right. And you can, again, younger women can rub it on topically. When I was pregnant, I delivered my son at 36 and a half, but I just used it topically. And even my GYN, who was so conservative, he's like, that's totally fine. Don't worry about it. I said, I don't want to miscarry. So yes. Okay. So many juicy things to unpack.
Yeah. Okay. And I had a miscarriage when I was 40. So then I got pregnant again at 3 months later. I had Kingston at 41, but I was on 100 milligrams of oral micronized progesterone all the way until I was 15 weeks pregnant.
Amen. Amen. Okay.
Guaranteed that's what helped me to maintain that second pregnancy.
So beautiful. Okay. So this is where I feel like you shine like a diamond, is the part of the books where you're teaching women to trust themselves in their bodies in this time. So how do you teach women how to trust themselves? And especially if they're 40 or older, they're in postpartum, they're heading down the perimenopause highway, or even if they're not postpartum and in perimenopause. Because I think this is really what made your book so unique, is unpacking that piece. Because doctors teach us not to trust our bodies. When they gaslight us, we say, I'm feeling this. That can't possibly be a thing. I'm not sleeping. I'm irritable. I have vaginal dryness. It's all in your head. And how many women in my practice have said, well, it must be in my head. Why would you believe your doctor and not what's physically happening in your own body?
I love this question. And this is such a big part of the Perimenopause Revolution book because exactly, we've been told, I cannot tell you how many times I have been told in a doctor's office that I am making this up, or it's just this little thing over here. It's not what I'm actually experiencing. I'm like, are you trying to talk me out of my own experience right now? Like, my goodness, is this really happening? Am I experiencing this? So yes, I think that there's something to be said about us trusting ourselves, us trusting that intuition, us trusting when something isn't right. And I get that many of us have been told to not, it's nothing, it's just stress. And also, women have also been, in a patriarchal society, we have been taught to be men, to be male CEOs in our business, and to not listen to our bodies, and to kind of just, and even if our body is telling us something, whispering, we kind of just keep pounding forward, right? And charging forward. And so if you are struggling, if you're like, man, I really have a hard time listening to my body, we live in a time of really incredible bioobservability. Like if I will say that although I check in with my body, I do a body scan every morning. I also wear a Whoop. And a Whoop will tell me too. I always kind of correlate. I'm like, okay, what does the data say on my Whoop relative to how I'm feeling this morning? I take that information in as well. Because based on how you feel day to day, it's really going to dictate how hard you're going to push that day, what you've got, stamina for, what you've got energy for. But my recommendation, particularly in perimenopause, when it comes to advocating for yourself, when it comes to getting the standard of care that you deserve, do your best to track your mood, your energy, your sleep, how you're feeling on a day-to-day. Please correlate those symptoms in relation to your menstrual cycle. And then, when you're going to that doctor's office visit, treat that visit like it's a very important meeting, and have the biggest priority symptoms that you want to address, have the labs that you want to run, but also connect those symptoms to how it's impacting your life, because then your doctor has to listen. So those are going to be important things that I always tell women, so that you're getting a gold standard of care. Also, most doctors are not menopause and perimenopause specialists or provide perimenopause and menopause care. It is okay for you to ask if they do or not, just point blank, so that I'm always say, I'm not here. I don't want to waste your time. I know that your time is invaluable. I want you to know that this is specifically what I do. And you're doing everybody a favor if we can just cut to the chase and find out if they know how to take care of you or not. And if they don't, you get to go and find somebody who does. You have every right to do so, because you deserve to feel good in your body. So that becomes such a big part of this conversation of, like, one, understanding that you deserve it. Number two, know your body so that you can advocate for yourself in a meaningful way.
Mm-hmm. And also remember this. There is never a woman who comes to me who says, I think it's my hormones, or I think it's this, who's ever been wrong. All of her symptoms track with any labs that I run every single time. So just remember, you are always your own best doctor. No provider is going to be a better doctor. You're the CEO of your health. And even before you get to the doctor's office, call them and say, this is what I need help with. Is this something you treat? Because that will also save you. Or if you go to the GYN, don't try and talk about it during your pap smear when someone's head's between your legs. Talk about it as a separate appointment and say, I'm just here today to talk about hormones. I'm just here today to talk about peri or menopause. That will also impact your outcomes favorably. Okay. So talk to me about your transition from postpartum into perimenopause. So you introduced hormones when? About 6-8 months after? And what hormones are you currently taking?
Yes, I introduced hormones about 8 months after. I got on that oral micronized progesterone as a concussion protocol initially, continuously. And then once I felt like I was out of the clear for the most part, then I started cycling oral micronized progesterone. And I'm still cycling oral micronized progesterone today. And I added in the estrogen patch, the estradiol patch, probably in January of 2024. So that next year. So I'm 44 years old when I'm officially on continuous estrogen, an estrogen patch, and then cycling oral micronized progesterone. And I've played with testosterone here and there. I've brought it in and taken it out and brought it in. And I haven't noticed a significant difference when I've done so. Yeah. Even though levels, they could be better. So I'm still playing with that a little bit. And yeah, I mean, I can't see myself ever going off hormones from this point forward. Although I will say, Esther, that although hormones have been incredible optimizers for me, the strategies that have moved the needle in the most profound way have been the strategies that regulate my nervous system and have been the strategies to help me feel more alive in my body. And a lot of that is really movement. I would say movement, being outside in nature, putting my feet in the ocean, connecting with my best friends. Those have been, and then really optimizing my sleep in terms of my sleep consistency. Those have been the things that have been the most profound in helping me to feel more energized, helping me to feel more even keeled, helping me to mitigate a lot of my symptoms in perimenopause. And then the hormones kind of being that little cherry on top.
That's right. And hormones, you can't out hormone your diet or your lifestyle. You've got to do the basics, which I know you strength train. I know you're so good with your sleep hygiene, and you really do a great job, the best you can with a young child, of work-life balance. It's far from perfect. It's very hard.
I was just listening. They left for school just now. During this interview, I had to leave. My son was like, "Don't leave me. I'm having you need to sit with me for breakfast." I'm like, "I have an interview. I gotta go." I'll tell you what, girl, they're late. They were supposed to leave 20 minutes ago. But you know what? I feel bad. My husband's got COVID right now, so he's doing the best he can.
Oh my God. But yeah, I mean, this is the reality sandwich, right? Or we're caring for aging parents and we have young kids and our careers are flourishing. So it's we do the best we can and we never let perfect be the enemy of done. And you're doing such a beautiful job. And it will be interesting, right, to hear from you, what your hormone trajectory is as you move through perimenopause. And I just want to also add, for everyone listening, if anyone's confused what it means to cycle progesterone, it means taking it the luteal phase of your cycle. So if you have a 28-day cycle, it's days 14 to 28. If your cycles are starting to spread out to day 30 to 35 to 40 days, then that's probably the time to start bringing in progesterone every night. Or if they start getting closer and closer together, would you agree with that that's the time to also bring in progesterone every night?
Agree. And if symptoms really warrant. If you are struggling with sleep halfway through half of the month when you're not on progesterone, or you're struggling with other symptoms, because again, it just all starts to blend together. Like your symptoms aren't cyclical anymore. They're just kind of happening all the time. That would be another time to be bringing in oral micronized progesterone continuously. You do not need to suffer needlessly because someone told you that you have to cycle progesterone. Again, you know your body best. And if you find that only half of the month you feel okay because you're taking progesterone, it's time to bring it in for the other half.
Amen. Amen. And also, you never have to wait. The biggest myth that providers tell their patients is that they have to wait until they're in full menopause to start hormones. That is the most detrimental thing you can do. And in the meantime, why don't you tell everyone what happens if you don't treat early and this is not to scare, this is to educate and empower you, but what happens when women are suffering and just leave their symptoms untreated?
The symptoms are not the silent shift. I mean, symptoms can be on the back end of that silent shift as well, but a lot of the silent shifts you're not necessarily feeling this, but the symptoms, gosh, those are disruptive, right? And you do not deserve to be suffering with these symptoms. I don't understand this whole myth or this dialogue around, oh, well, you can suffer with these symptoms of perimenopause because, oh, it's just perimenopause. You'll be over this at some point. I'm like, but what if you're not? What if, because for so many women, particularly women who are not being treated with hormone replacement therapy, they linger for years, years. And again, those aren't the silent changes. What about the creeping insulin resistance? What about the creeping blood pressure changes, the creeping triglycerides, and the decline in HDL cholesterol? What about the creeping waistline? What about the inflammation building up in your brain? What about all of these changes that you may not be feeling? What about the bone loss? Yeah, I don't understand why we would wait until you are fully out of perimenopause and officially in menopause, where you have been losing bone that entire window of vulnerability. The entire time you're becoming more insulin resistant that entire time. And so what we know for sure is that once we get into menopause and there's no hormone support and the hormones have bottomed out, there's this myth again that in menopause, your hormones are leveling out. They're not leveling out. They are bottoming out. That is what they're doing. They're not coming back to cycling range. They're not coming back to physiological range ever again. And this is that misconception. Women always ask me in menopause, should we, in their 60s, they're like, let's test my hormones. I'm like, I know exactly where your hormones are at.
Circling the drain. Circling the drain. And also the genitourinary symptoms of menopause. And, you're dry as the...
Yes, all vaginas need estrogen. It's 98% of women that are going to, if not more, I think that's like the statistical research, that 98% of women will have genital urinary symptoms of menopause, including UTIs, incontinence, vaginal dryness, atrophy, low libido. All of this is interconnected. And that impacts our quality of life in such a profound way. I mean, the UTIs alone are reason enough to put a woman into assisted living.
That's right. And they're lethal. And elderly women, the women who have Alzheimer's and are in diapers and can't advocate or even understand or know they have a UTI, those UTIs can be lethal. So it is no joke. But
yeah, it's one of the reasons why we lose our freedom. 1 in 2 women are going to have an osteoporotic fracture. 1 in 3 women are going to have a heart attack or a stroke. We know that although we live longer than men, 25% more of our lives are spent in debilitating health. And yes, lifestyle is a major player here, but also it's our hormones. And, I know that the Women's Health Initiative have shaped so much of how we think about prescribing hormone replacement therapy. And so there's that called the healthy cell hypothesis, where if we start women on HRT, hormone replacement therapy, between 50 and 59, we significantly increase her quality of life. But why are we even waiting until 50 to 59? Like, why aren't we, again, if women are suffering with symptoms at 45 or 46 or 44, I don't understand the rationale around waiting until she's 50 or 51 or 52. And so I think what we're learning, particularly at least within clinical practice, is that we can mitigate these symptoms. And here's the thing: when we're struggling with symptoms, it can drive even more symptoms. When we're suffering, it just begets more suffering. And so if we can mitigate those symptoms in perimenopause, we are setting women up to succeed far more than if we were to wait until they were in their 50s in this healthy cell hypothesis window. The only reason why we know that it's 50 to 59 is we weren't putting women on HRT in their 40s in the Women's Health Initiative. It just wasn't happening.
Yes. Okay. You talk a lot about your continuous glucose monitor. I would love to know how that supported you and what, if any, diet or lifestyle changes you made since wearing it. How did it impact you?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we live in a time of bioobservability. And I think that data that we can collect on ourselves is profound, especially if you've grown up your entire life being told to not listen to your body. And so I think there is a kind of a retraining of like listening to our body. So I am a big fan of continuous glucose monitors. I believe that our blood glucose levels or our fasting, even our fasting blood glucose is one of the most important biomarkers for cellular energy and longevity. It can really, again, it's not fasting insulin. We don't have a way of looking at insulin levels 24/7 like we do fasting glucose, but it is a window into understanding our cellular energy. And what we know for sure is there's a lot of things that impact our cellular energy. As a result, it impacts our blood glucose levels, particularly the food that we eat, the way that we move our body, the stress that we're dealing with in the day, our sleep, also our stress reducing habits and strategies. All of this can impact our blood glucose levels. And ideally, what we want when we're looking at blood glucose variability, so the way that our blood sugars moves and changes throughout the day 24/7, is we want it to be pretty steady. Think of like gentle rolling hills. What we don't want is climbing Mount Everest and plunging back down, up and down all day long, which I call the blood sugar roller coaster. What that means is when our blood sugar is erratic like that, it's going to impact our mood, our energy, our stamina, our sleep. It's going to impact so many things in our body, but overall, our metabolic health. And so wearing a continuous glucose monitor can tell you a lot about how sleep is impacting your cellular energy. I mean, obviously you'll notice, I don't know about you, Esther, but like sleep will make or break me any day of the week. If I got poor sleep, I will feel it the next day, but I just want you to know that blood sugar can be impacted by your sleep, but also if you're eating late night snacks before going to bed, that's also going to impact your sleep. The way that you move your body throughout the day is going to impact your blood sugar. What type of events and, conversations you're having could be impacting your blood sugar. But the number one thing that's going to impact your blood sugar and your cellular energy is your molecular information. What you put into your body is going to massively impact your cellular energy. And so a big part of the book talks about eating metabolically healthy meals that are rich with fiber, protein, healthy fats, and avoids refined grains, refined sugar, ultra processed foods that, again, isn't providing the level of molecular information and substrate to drive your cellular energy. So, but one of the best ways that we can make those changes is if we're looking and tracking that information in real time, and we can do that with a continuous glucose monitor.
That's right. And your diet really does trend, which the recipes in there are beautiful, by the way. If you ever need inspo and you're in a slump with recipes, it's really beautiful meals. They are lower. It is a lower carb meal plan. So obviously you do need to tweak, and you may need to level up your carbs, or
always anybody, right?
Anybody.
When I'm making recipes, I used to make recipes predominantly. I had such a big community base with autoimmunity. And so a lot of my recipes were driven by autoimmune conditions, which meant no dairy, no gluten, no a whole lot of things, no eggs, sometimes nuts. And so with this, I was, the approach really was more of how do we provide the right substrates to reduce inflammation and to give our cells the energy that they need. An interesting fact, Esther, is that the book got so long, which obviously not.
I know, it's amazing.
But the recipes had to get cut. I was only allowed to keep, I think, 13 of the 40 recipes in the book. But as a part of the bonuses, I give you all the recipes. Like I have 3 different chia recipes. I have all kinds of yummy breakfast recipes. I have so many recipes in this book that I give you as a part of the bonuses because one, it took me a month to get these recipes created. And so when Hay House was like, we got to cut 3/4 of them, I was like, what? But we put them all into the bonuses. So I want you to know that you get all of it. And the bonuses happen if you pre-order the book. So you can get all the recipes and all the meal plan and everything you need that all was supposed to be in the book. You can get it well before you even get the book, depending on when this comes out.
Incredible. So, okay, one more question, and then I want to come back to those bonuses. So, yes, a glucose monitor is excellent information. What range do you like, people? What is tight to you? It's different for everybody. For you personally, like, where do you feel you are best when you keep your numbers tight?
So my optimal range personally is going to be on the 70 milligrams per deciliter on the lower end, although it can dip into the 60s, like late in the morning, absolutely. Or early in the morning, late at night. But I don't typically see mine go below like 64, 63 milligrams per deciliter. It really depends on the person. And then post meals, that's where we're going to see the biggest blood sugar kind of rise. I typically don't go above 110 milligrams per deciliter.
That's nice. That's gorgeous. That's really tight. And your insulin, you really want your insulin 5 or lower.
5 or lower. Yep. And so mine's last time I looked at it, which is a couple weeks ago, is a 4.3.
Yeah. Stunning. Absolutely gorgeous. Okay. So where can people get these bonuses, and what's your Instagram handle? Your website is drmariza.com. Where can everyone get everything else? And we're going to put these in the show notes.
Yes. So a big part of this book was giving you the actionable strategies that are going to move the needle in a meaningful way. I mean, because at the end of the day, if I'm not getting you wins, if I'm not helping you to feel your very best and to feel like yourself again, then what are we doing? Then I am wasting your time. And so such a big part of this book, actually 2/3 of this book, is all strategies to move the needle, to balance your blood sugar, to help support your mental energy, to reduce the amount of stress that you're dealing with across the board. Strategies for sleep, strategies for movement, strategies for your morning and evening rituals. I mean, I just want you to feel like yourself again, if not better. And so the bonuses are built in exactly like the book, so that you don't have to wait to get the book. Like once I order a book, I want to get started now. Like when I've decided that I am ready to make change, like today, right now, let's go. So the bonuses are built where I have symptom trackers and I have lab ranges and the lab to take to your doctor. I mean, actionable things to advocate for yourself. All the recipes, the 40 plus recipes that I'm telling you, I'm a busy mama. I get it. You can do these recipes. Let me tell you, a meal plan, exercise snack routines, workout routines, beginner and intermediate. I mean, and everything in between. I have built in my morning rituals, evening rituals, supplement stack. I mean, I left no stone left unturned for you when it comes to these bonuses, so that you can start wherever you need to start and literally hit the ground running. Like that is my intention for you. The book is wherever books are sold right now. If you go to the book bonus page, that's Dr. Mariza, drmariza.com/book. The bonuses are there. Just input your information and I will instantaneously deliver them to your inbox. Let's freaking go.
Let's freaking go, girl. I'm so proud of you. Mwah. Can't wait for this to come out. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast today. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, leave a review, or visit estherblum.com/podcast.